pie was still warm when I parked at the end of my brother's street, 3 driveways down because there was nowhere closer, and I sat there for a second with both hands on the wheel, watching the windows glow gold like a magazine ad for a life I used to think I was part of. Somebody's kid ran across the lawn in a turkey costume. I could hear music, the low thump of it through the glass. I'd made the pumpkin from scratch this year, the way our grandmother used to, with the real custard that you have to stir forever so it doesn't curdle. And I'd burned my wrist on the oven rack pulling it out at 6 that morning, so it would still be a little warm when I got there. 40 minutes of driving. The pie rode shotgun in the towel. I waited. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe for the front door to open before I knocked. Maybe for somebody to be watching for me. Nobody was, so I balanced the pie on one hand, grabbed the bag of dinner rolls and the little wrapped presents for the kids, and walked up the path in the cold. The doorbell didn't work. It hadn't worked in 2 years. So I knocked with my elbow and pushed the door open with my hip the way you do when your hands are full and you've been part of a place long enough to just walk in. The warmth hit me first. Then the noise. My brother's house always sounds like a restaurant on Thanksgiving. All the cousins talking over each other, the football on in the den, somebody's baby crying somewhere upstairs. Oh, you came! That was my sister-in-law, crossing the foyer with a wine glass held up near her collarbone like a brooch. She has a way of saying things that sound like welcome and land like a door closing. We honestly weren't sure. I told everyone, don't count on it. I texted last week that I'd be here, I said. Did you? Her. She was already looking past me at the pie. You can set that in the kitchen. We've got dessert kind of handled, but there's always room, I'm sure. I carried it back myself. Nobody offered to take it. The kitchen counter was a sea of store-bought boxes, a pecan from the Good Bakery, 2 apple, a cheesecake with a sticker still on the dome. And I cleared a corner of the counter behind the coffee maker and set my grandmother's pie there, the towel still damp around it. And I knew before I even let go of it that nobody was going to cut into it. There was a seating chart taped to the wall by the dining room, an actual seating chart, printed with little place cards. My sister-in-law does this now. She got into hosting about 3 years ago, around the time my brother's company went public and the money started, and now Thanksgiving has a theme and a tablescape and a chart on the wall like a wedding. I read it twice. My name wasn't on the long table. I found it eventually. Lower corner, smaller font, the card table by the kitchen doorway, the one that wobbles, set up with the folding chairs and the paper napkins instead of the cloth ones, next to a high chair. Next to my nephew, who is 4. We ran a little over on the count, my sister-in-law said, appearing again at my shoulder. Last-minute people. You don't mind being flexible. I know you're easy. I'm easy. That's the word that gets used. Easy. Low maintenance. Doesn't make a fuss. I sat at the wobbly table next to my 4-year-old nephew, who spilled apple juice on his good pants within the first 10 minutes and looked at me with that betrayed face kids make, and I dabbed it with a paper napkin and told him it was okay. Accidents happen. And that was the most real conversation I had for the next 2 hours. From where I sat, I could see the long table sideways. My brother at the head, laughing at something. My father beside him, the spot of honour, telling the story he always tells about the lake house. My sister-in-law floating up and down with the wine. My mother in the middle, queen of the cul-de-sac, clinking her glass against the neighbours. At one point my mother stood and walked a man I didn't recognise. Some business friend of my brother's, I think, over toward the kitchen, and she gestured at me with her wine glass and said, and this is, you've met, no, this is she's around, she comes for the holidays, she's around, she comes for the holidays, she's around, not my daughter, not even my name, not right away, like she had to dig for it, she comes for the holidays, like I was a neighbour who waters the plants. I want to tell you that didn't land, it landed. Last year there had been a card on my chair at the real table that said, so glad you're home. My niece, she's 7 now, had run at me full speed when I walked in and made me promise we'd do the hand turkeys with the construction paper like we did every year. This year she didn't look up from her tablet when I said hi. I found her later by the stairs and crouched down and asked if she still wanted to do the turkeys. And she said, not unkindly, just matter of fact the way kids are, Mom said you don't really come around anymore, so I didn't know if you were still my aunt. I told her I would always be her aunt. I told her I would always be her aunt. I meant it, but I sat back on my heels in that hallway and I genuinely didn't know if it was true anymore, in any way that the rest of them would honour. Here is the thing nobody at that table knew. 4 years ago, when my brother's startup was 8 months from running out of money, when he was about to lay off the 11 people he'd hired and lose the house he'd just bought, I wired him $140,000, my savings, plus a chunk of what I'd just made selling out of my own first company, a small one, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't make the family newsletter because it isn't a story anyone in my family knows how to tell. He paid it back, technically 18 months later, but by then his next round had closed and the money meant nothing to him and the help had been quietly rewritten in family memory as the time he had a rough patch and pulled himself out of it. I never corrected it. I thought it would be enough to have done it. I thought if I just kept helping, kept showing up with the homemade pie and the gifts and the patience, eventually they'd see me. I covered 2 summers of my niece's day camp. I co-signed my parents' refinance when their credit dipped after my father's surgery, and I never told my brother because my mother asked me not to. Said it would embarrass your father. I paid for my grandmother's hospice room to be a private one those last weeks, the one with the window, and let everyone believe the insurance did it. My role in that family was to be useful, never to be thanked. There is a difference between being needed and being valued, and I had spent 31 years confusing the two. I'm a financial planner. I manage a little over $6 million in client assets. I have my own practice with my name actually painted on the glass door downtown. And the last business cards I had printed are still in my purse because there has never once been a moment in their house where anyone asked enough about my life for me to hand one over. To my mother, I'm still figuring things out. To my brother, I am the little sister who had a phase with the business stuff. After the plates were cleared, my sister-in-law dimmed the lights and my brother stood up to do a few words. There was a slideshow. He'd made a slideshow. Photos came up on the wall over the fireplace, set to that soft acoustic music people use. And there were the late trips and the birthdays and the graduations, and there was one from 2 Christmases ago that I remembered being in. I was standing right next to my father in that photo. I had my arm around him, except in the version on the wall I had been cropped out, cleanly. There was a sliver of my elbow, maybe, at the very edge that they'd missed. A cousin 2 seats down leaned over and stage whispered, grinning, "You're like a ghost. You're never in any of these." And a couple of people laughed, the easy laugh of people who don't know they're stepping on something. I wasn't a ghost. I had been there. Someone had taken scissors to me. That was the moment something in me went very quiet and very clear. Not loud, not a scene. I have never in my life made the scene they're all so afraid I'll make. I just went still inside, the way the air goes still right before the weather changes. Because here is what none of them knew, and what I had been carrying in a fireproof folder in the trunk of my car the entire night. The whole time I sat at that wobbly table, my grandmother, my father's mother, the one whose pie was sitting uncut behind a coffee maker, had not left her estate the way the family believed. The family believed it had been handled, divided sensibly. The bulk of it rolled into a trust my father managed. That's what my father told everyone. That's what everyone repeated. What actually happened was that 2 years before she died, when her mind was still entirely her own, and she was sharper than any of them, my grandmother sat across from me at her kitchen table and said, "They see what they want to see. You see what they want to see. You see what's there." And she changed her estate, quietly, with her own attorney, not my father's. She made me the sole trustee and primary beneficiary of everything outside the small, visible accounts my father knew about. The coastal property she'd bought in the 70s before that stretch of shoreline was worth anything, which was now worth a great deal. An investment portfolio she'd been building for 40 years and never once mentioned at a holiday table, and oversight of the family foundation that had her name on it. She didn't do it to reward me. She did it because she watched the same thing I lived. She used to call me after every holiday, every single one, and she'd say, "I saw where they sat you." She saw. The only one who did. I never told anyone. I'd had the documents for over a year. I'd told myself I was waiting for the right time, but the truth is I was waiting to find out if I'd ever stopped needing them to choose me. That night, at that table, watching my own elbow disappear off the wall, I found out. I was done waiting. I didn't say anything. I helped my nephew with his pie. A store-bought slice, not mine. Mine was still untouched, and I told my niece I loved her, and I got my coat, and on my way out, my mother caught my arm by the door and said lightly, the way she says everything that cuts, "You're not going to make this weird, are you? You always get so sensitive at the holidays. Just let people enjoy themselves." "I'm not going to make anything weird," I said. And I meant that too. I drove home in the dark with the heat blasting and the empty pie towel on the passenger seat, and somewhere on the highway, past the exit for the lake house my father loves to tell stories about, the strangest thing happened. I started to feel light. Not happy exactly. Light. Like setting down something I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it had weight. The next morning I drove to the coast. The house sits up on a low bluff with seagrass all around it and a gravel drive that needs regrading, and I let myself in with a key I'd carried for 14 months and never used. And I stood in the front room while the light came off the water and filled the whole place, and I didn't cry. I thought I might. I just breathed. There were no family photos on these walls. No certificates, no trophies, no proof of life arranged for guests. Just windows and the ocean. And a quiet that didn't have teeth in it. I sat down at my grandmother's old walnut desk. She'd left that too. It had been in the family 100 years and she'd left it to me. And I opened my laptop and I did the thing I am actually good at, the thing nobody in my family has ever once asked me to explain. I called my own attorney. Then I called the foundations. Over the next 2 weeks, calmly on paper, with no scene at all, I did the following. I notified the foundation board, of which my father believed himself the chair, that under the terms of the trust the chairmanship had transferred to me upon my grandmother's death, and that I would be exercising it. I pulled the foundation's records and found, as my grandmother had quietly suspected before she died, that my father had been treating its funds as a personal line of credit, nothing criminal, just casual, the way he is casual with everything that isn't watched. I didn't go to anyone with it. I just froze it, cleanly, legally, the way you turn off a faucet. And I wrote something. There's a publication, a fairly serious one, in personal finance and family wealth, that had asked me twice before to write for them, and twice I'd been too busy, too quiet, too used to staying small. I wrote them an essay. It wasn't a tell-all. I named no one. It was about the difference between the people a family thanks and the people a family relies on, about invisible labour and money inside families, about how the person who quietly keeps everyone afloat is so often the person seated at the children's table. I titled it The Seat They Gave Me. I edited it 11 times. It was clean and it was true and it didn't have a drop of venom in it. It went up on a Tuesday. I didn't send it to anyone in my family. I didn't have to. By Thursday it had been shared a few thousand times, mostly by women, mostly with one line of their own added on top. This is my family. Over and over. This is exactly my family. My inbox filled with strangers. A woman who'd been the one who paid for everything and got invited to nothing. A man who put 3 siblings through school and was still called the unsuccessful one. They didn't want anything from me. They just wanted to be seen. The way I'd just been seen by a stranger. The way I'd never been seen at home. My sister-in-law posted a photo that weekend. She does this thing where she posts an aesthetic photo with a caption about gratitude and growth. This one was her, standing on a bluff, the ocean behind her, wind in her hair, captioned grateful for new chapters and the legacy we're building. Never blessed. Generational wealth. She was standing on the deck of the COASTAL House, my house. She'd driven out, found the spare key under the planter where it had been for 40 years, and posed there like she owned it, and tagged the location wrong, and had no idea, none, that the deed on file at the county had my name on it and only my name. The comments started underneath her photo within an hour. Wait, isn't this the house from that article? I just read this exact place. Are you the sister she wrote about? She edited the caption. Then she edited it again. Then she edited it again. Then, sometime that evening, she took it down. I never screenshotted it. I genuinely didn't need to. My phone started ringing after that. My brother first. A voicemail that started warm and got tight. Hey, just want to clear up some confusion. Call me back. I didn't. Then my mother, 3 times. The third one just a sigh and a, I don't understand what's gotten into you. I didn't call her back either. My father called last. I let it go to voicemail and read the transcript instead. Sitting on the back deck with coffee. The tide going out. I read your piece, it said. You always could write. I think we should talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding about some of the foundation matters, and I'd like to clear it up before this gets complicated. Not I'm sorry, not I saw where we sat you. He wanted to clear up the foundation. He wanted his faucet back. I called him. He answered on the first ring, which told me everything. Sweetheart, he said, you haven't called me that since I was 9. A pause. I read your essay. It was pointed. It didn't name anyone. It didn't have to. Another pause, and then the pivot I'd known was coming, smooth as ever. Listen, about the foundation. There's clearly been some administrative mix-up with the chairmanship, and I think if we just sit down, there's no mix-up, I said. Grandma made me trustee 2 years before she died, with her own lawyer. You've been running it like it was yours because nobody ever made you stop. I'm making you stop. That's all that's happening. The silence on the line was not a guilty silence. I want to be honest about that, because for years I'd imagined that if I ever said the true thing out loud, there'd be some breaking, some recognition. There wasn't. It was the silence of a man recalculating, doing math. You don't have to do it like this, he said finally. Like what? I'm not doing anything like anything. I'm not making a scene. You all spent 30 years afraid I'd make a scene, and I never once did. I just stopped covering for you. I watched a gull drop onto the rail and watch me. Did you know Grandma called me after every holiday, every single one, to tell me she saw where you sat me? I heard him exhale. I have to go, Dad. The tide's coming in. And I hung up, and for the first time in my life, hanging up on my father, I didn't feel like I'd done something wrong. I felt like I'd finally stopped apologising for existing. The last call I took, I almost didn't. It came from a number I didn't know, late, and I picked up out of some instinct I can't explain, and it was my niece. 7 years old, whispering, clearly past her bedtime, clearly on a phone she wasn't supposed to have. Aunt, she said, I found something. She'd been in the hall closet, looking for the construction paper for hand turkeys. She'd remembered, she'd wanted to do them, and behind the wrapping paper she'd found a shoebox, and inside it were all the cards I'd ever made or sent. Every birthday card, the construction paper turkeys from when she was tiny, a drawing I'd done for her of the 2 of us. Her mother had kept them, boxed up and hidden, but kept, and underneath all of it, my niece said, there was a letter with my name on the front in handwriting she didn't recognise, old-fashioned, and she'd sounded out the return address, and it said the coastal town, and she figured it was from my grandmother. And she didn't open it because it wasn't hers to open, and did I want her to mail it to me? I sat very still in the dark. Can you ask your mum to mail it to me, sweetheart? No, she said, with the certainty of a child who has decided something. I'm going to keep it safe until I see you, so you have to come see me. I laughed, and it came out wet. Okay, I said, I'll come see you. I'll always come see you. You're the only one in that house who ever actually looked for me. The letter came 3 weeks later, mailed by my niece anyway, in a fat envelope with 3 extra stamps and her name printed huge in the corner. Inside the original envelope, in my grandmother's handwriting, was a single page. Not a will, not a document, none of the legal weight I'd spent a year managing. Just a note, dated the spring before she died. You'll have it all by the time you read this, she wrote, and they'll be very surprised, and you'll be tempted to explain yourself to them. Don't. You have never once owed them an explanation. You were the only one who came to see me who didn't first check what I was leaving. Build your life on the bluff. Let them stand on the shore and wonder. And tell my great-granddaughter the pie has to be stirred forever or it curdles. She's the next one who can see. I read it 4 times. I made my grandmother's pie that weekend in the kitchen of the house on the bluff, and I stirred the custard forever, and I burned my wrist again on the rack, and I didn't mind at all. I never went back to a holiday at my brother's house. I host now out at the coast, a small table, the good cloth napkins, no seating chart, because there are never more people than there are good seats. My niece comes every year driven out by a mother who has learned the hard and public way exactly whose name is on the deed. The kid sits next to me. We do the hand turkeys. She's getting too old for them and does them anyway for me. And one of these years I'll teach her to stir the custard, and I'll tell her what her great-great-grandmother told me at a kitchen table a long time ago. They see what they want to see. You see what's there. That, it turns out, was the whole inheritance. The house was just where I keep it. I used to think being needed was the same thing as being loved. It took me 31 years and a wobbly card table next to a 4-year-old to finally understand the difference. They needed my checkbook, my co-signature, my silence. They never once needed me. And the strangest part is that I let it happen, year after year, because I kept believing that if I gave enough, stayed quiet enough, made myself small enough, somebody would eventually look up from the long table and see me sitting in the corner. Nobody ever did. Nobody was ever going to. What I learned, sitting on that bluff with my grandmother's letter in my hands, is that you cannot earn a seat at a table from people who have already decided you belong on the floor. The wiring of $140,000 didn't buy me belonging. The private hospice room, the day camps, the refinance I never mentioned. None of it bought me a single honest place card. Generosity is only love when it flows both ways. When it only flows one way, it isn't generosity at all. It's a tax you pay on a relationship that doesn't actually exist. But here is the part I want you to hear, because it's the part that saved me. My grandmother didn't change her estate to give me money. She changed it because she had spent her whole life watching people, and she had learned to tell the difference between the ones who count what you're leaving and the ones who simply come to sit with you. That kind of clear-eyed seeing, refusing to flatter the loud and overlook the quiet, is a discipline, not a feeling. She taught me to hold a hard truth steady without turning it into a weapon. I never raised my voice at that table. I never made the scene they all dreaded. I just stopped lying for them. And I let the paperwork, the public record, and my own quiet competence speak in a language they'd spent decades pretending I couldn't speak. It would have been easier to scream. It would have been easier to send the screenshots to humiliate my sister-in-law, to make my father grovel. I didn't, and not because I'm a saint. I'm not. I didn't because the only way out of being defined by their smallness was to refuse to become small in return. I chose my own conduct over their comeuppance. That choice required something I didn't know I had, the steadiness to keep building my life on the bluff while they stood on the shore and wondered. So if you're the one they seat in the corner, the one they thank by forgetting, hear me. Stop auditioning for people who tossed a script. Keep your honesty cleaner than their cruelty, sharper than their convenience, and stronger than your own urge to keep proving yourself. The seat you're looking for was never at their table. It's the one you build yourself with the good napkins, where the only people who get a place card are the ones who came looking for you.